Good afternoon. My name is Susan Doyle from Box Media and I will be your facilitator today. I would like to welcome you to Lean Construction Ireland's 26th webinar, the topic of which is Lean BIM, Building Information Modelling, presented by Ralph Montague, Director at ArcDocs. If you have a question, please type it in the question box and we will consolidate and ask Ralph in the second half of the webinar. If there are any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. This webinar has been brought to you by Lean Construction Ireland in conjunction with Box Media, their media and communications partner. The speaker for today is Ralph Montague, Director at ArcDocs. Ralph is an architect and director at ArcDocs, Ireland's leading BIM consultancy practice. For over 10 years, ArcDocs have provided advisory, production, training and support services to projects, companies and individuals to enable and support BIM. Ralph has served on the National BIM Council of Ireland, the Royal Institute of the Architects of Ireland BIM Committee, the Architects Council of Europe BIM Working Group, and is a board member of the Construction IT Alliance. He is also the current chair of the National Standards Authority of Ireland Technical Mirror Committee for BIM and a part-time lecturer on the Trinity College Postgraduate Diploma in Project Management. I will now pass you over to Ralph to start his presentation.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks everyone for taking time out to join this webinar. We were hoping to have a little survey and we can get the technology to work. So Susan's going to send around these questions at the end of the webinar, and we'd really appreciate if you could answer these or rank your projects according to these questions, and just to give LCI a good feel of where the industry is at in terms of adoption of BIM and Lean, or both. So the topic today is Lean BIM, or BIM and Lean, if you like. I wanted to start with this picture. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is a room in the basement of an office building in Dublin of one of our clients. And what you're looking at here is the information about this building. And if you're a Lean practitioner, you're looking at this, I mean, can you see the waste in this picture is the question. What's the problem? Well, let me tell you, hundreds of thousands of euros was spent collecting, collating that information during the construction of this building. Thousands of man hours went into this. But the question is, how useful is this information to anybody who's either building or operating this building? You know, is it easy to find stuff? Is it accessible when you need it? Is it accurate? Would you trust the information if you did find something in one of those boxes? You know, so the problem isn't that we can't build buildings with this type of information. We've proved for thousands of years this building was built and this building is currently being operated. So the problem really is that every time you want to do something, it costs you more time and more money to find and hold the information you need to perform that task. And there was an excellent study done by the Boston Consulting Group, who consults to the World Economic Forum, and basically they concluded that the cost of not using digital information is in the order of 13 to 20% during design and construction, and 10 to 17% every year in the operations of the building. And the interesting thing is, a lot of technology was used to produce this information, you know, be it CAD or Excel or P6, Primavera, whatever technologies people are using. But at the point of exchanging information with other people, they dumbed it down to a piece of paper or a PDF on a DVD or whatever format they exchange the information with. So this is really what we want to address today, is the waste that's involved in the way we produce and manage information about buildings. And since we're talking about waste, and that's the topic of Lean. So the agenda is to talk about the connection between lean and BIM, how we can use BIM to be more lean in the way we construct buildings, how we can also be lean in the way we use BIM, so we're not producing information in a wasteful way. We'll talk about some of the challenges and the opportunities that are available to us, and then we'll have some discussion and some questions. So first, the relationship between lean and BIM. Lean is all about reducing waste. BIM is all about managing information, and you might think those things aren't related in any way, but they're completely related in that whatever task you have to carry out, you need some information to instruct you or tell you how to carry out that task. So there's an information input, and in carrying out that task, you will often produce new information which other people would need to do their job. So, information is important in the input and as a result of tasks. The quality of information will affect how well that task goes. But quality, I mean, how accurate is the information? Do I have it on time? Is it easily accessible or available to me when I need it? Is it searchable? So, poor quality information is going to impact negatively on that task, and good quality information is going to have a positive impact on that task. And when we talk about waste, and waste in the production of information, the management of information, but also in the outcomes of poor quality information, we're talking about these things in this list. Wasted time, effort, duplication of work, abortive work, etc. None of these things listed here adds any value to the project. So by definition, that's waste. And the LCI have measured across many projects the waste in construction, and it's greater than 30%. Sometimes they say it's even closer to 40–50% of the cost of construction is waste. So that's an enormous percentage. So there is an absolute synergy and link between information and the outcomes and waste. So lean and BIM go hand in hand, and I think that's really important for people to understand. So lean production theory comes out of the manufacturing industry. So what can we learn from the manufacturing industry? If you were going to build a product, the way they would do it is they would construct that product in software. So they construct a digital model of their product and all the components that make up that product, and they would resolve and coordinate that model to make sure all the pieces are going to fit together. And then they would go and procure the various components, parts of that product, and have an accurate price on each individual item. And then on the factory floor, they'd assemble those components exactly the way they had designed it. So they wouldn't change things as they were assembling it, because the people on the factory floor might not know what the impact of a change might be on somebody else down the line. So they construct exactly what was designed in the digital model, and you end up with a physical product which 100% matches the digital twin, if you like, the digital version of their product, and all the information you need to know about every component part is digitally available and accessible. So you can walk into a shop or go online, type in the part number, and immediately get information about every component of that product. So that's the way they work in manufacturing. How do we work in construction? So what we do in construction is we produce some documents which more or less describe what it is we think we want to build. So it's called design intent information. it's not 100% resolved. It's it's not coordinated, but it's we feel it's enough to describe what it is we think we want to build. Then we go out to the market and we procure packages of work at risk. In other words, we say to people, well, you can do this package of work. We haven't completely figured it out, but if you take on the risk, you can do this work. And then we go to site and we start constructing, and we figure out and coordinate and resolve the building as we're building it. And because there's so many changes on site, and it's very difficult to capture all the information of what actually got constructed, and so you end up with this room full of boxes of documents that are not really useful to people. So, but it's not to say that construction doesn't work. I mean, we do end up with buildings. We do build buildings, but it's very time consuming. It's very risky. It's very wasteful. But we do eventually get a building, and we can operate that building. But it's as I said, it's very wasteful. So what's interesting when you look at these two approaches is manufacturers actually build the thing twice. So they build it once as a digital model where they can coordinate it and sort out the problems in a very cheap environment, or safe environment, and then they build it a second time, physically on a factory floor where everything goes well. Whereas in construction, we're really just building the thing once, and we're sort of figuring it out as we go along. So that's the big difference. So, when you looked at these two, which one of these is more efficient? Which one is more lean? Which one creates more waste? And while instinctively you might think building something twice is less efficient than building it once, actually it turns out that building it twice in this way is more efficient and more lean than building it once. So if we talk about the production of information, let's look at different scenarios. One is we don't use BIM. So we just use the traditional practice of producing several documents that describe the building. So they're all separately produced, they're separately managed, drawings and schedules and specifications, and bills of quantities, etc. And we have a set of documents that describe the building and provide the information that people need to carry out the work. Now, what's the problem with this way of producing and managing information? Well, every document, since it's produced separately, potentially has inconsistencies and errors. Those errors and inconsistencies turn into waste. They turn into delays, requests for information, potential abortive work or rework. So, and we all understand that. We've been doing that for many, many years. Okay. BIM, as a different approach, is more like manufacturing, where you build the building in a digital model. So you describe the building once through intelligent 3D objects, which you assemble into a building information model. So BIM starts with objects which represent the physical components of the building. Those objects have attributes of information or properties which describe all the functional aspects of that component of the building, what the fire rating is, or the acoustic rating, etc. Stored within the object as digital data, which can be used for many, many purposes. Those objects are then assembled into a digital version of the building or a model, and so you're constructing the model from components in a computer. And in that environment, you can coordinate. So you can make sure all the components of the building are going to fit together. You can plan the sequence of construction, so you can connect all objects to a construction program or time. You can do, since every object knows what it is, you can do quantity takeoffs, or let the computer count how many of those things are in the model, and you can do analysis or predictive analysis of how this building might perform by connecting it to real-time weather data or exposure to sun, wind, etc. So you really building the building and you're testing it completely within the software environment where it's cheap and safe to make changes. And then you produce from that model documentation. Now, the difference here is nobody draws those drawings or types out those schedules. All the documentation is being generated from this digital model. Okay. So when you look at the two side by side, you might say, well, the output is the same. You end up with a set of documentation for the building, but the input is completely different. In one scenario, you're describing something several times and ending up with lots of inconsistencies across the documentation. And in the other scenario, you're describing things once and you're ending up with a coordinated set of documentation, which reflects the building you're going to build. Now, I want to introduce you to a third scenario, and it's something I call pseudo-BIM. Pseudo-BIM is where you start by doing what you always did. So you go and produce a set of documents, plans, elevations, sections, details in the normal way. And then in addition to that, you go and construct a model, for the purposes of coordination or whatever. So you might say, well, what's the problem with that? Because you end up with the same, it looks like it's the same output, but there's a subtle difference in that the documentation in this scenario has not been generated from this coordinated model. It's been generated separately and individually, and therefore continues to have all the inconsistencies and errors and omissions, etc., that turn into waste. And so there's no connection between the model and the outputs. So when you put those three together and you ask the question, which of these three is the most efficient or produces the least waste or is the most productive? And particularly considering the amount of effort that goes into originally producing the information, but also how you do rework and change management, etc. In the scenario where you're not using BIM, if there's a change in the building, you've got to go and change all those individual documents separately and individually. Where with BIM, if you need to make a change, you make the change once in the model and regenerate all the documents to have a new set of coordinated documents. And then accuracy of information. So, obviously, BIM is the most efficient way of producing information. Describing something once is more efficient than describing it 7 times. And describing something once is more efficient than describing it 7 times and then additionally describing it again. So that's the most efficient way of producing information and produces the least amount of waste because it reduces the inconsistencies and errors, etc. No BIM is obviously the next one in terms of efficiency, and pseudo BIM is the least efficient out of all three of those scenarios. And yet, pseudo BIM is what's being practiced by most people who say they're doing BIM. They're continuing to draw drawings and things separately, and then coming in afterwards and producing a separate model. So this is really important to understand the subtle differences between those methodologies. So let's briefly talk about this idea of the digital twin, which is an idea that's come from the manufacturing industry. But the idea is that buildings are made up of components, and there's a physical component in this instance, just an air handling unit, and the digital version of this would look like this. There will be a graphical object that represents that component, and the importance of the graphical object is it describes the geometry and the size, the location, the connections to other components and systems and relationships. So it's a very important part of the digital twin, but it's not the only part. So the other important part is all the useful information about that thing, whatever, who made it, when it was installed, what the airflow rate is, etc. So non-graphical data that could be searched and queried and used by computers. And then, of course, we can't forget about documentation. So in order to sell this thing in Ireland, you have to have declarations of performance and technical assessments and installation certificates and commissioning certificates and all sorts of operators manual. So those types of documents aren't serialized as data, but you still need to get hold of them. So the digital twin is actually all of these things. So a lot of people think BIM is just 3D objects. It's not. It's all of these types of information held in a common data environment that's accessible and easy to get to. And the secret sauce in all this is to connect these things through a common coding system. And what we use in Ireland is the UniClass code, a unified classification code. And this, just imagine if every object in the model had the same code as every item in the specification and had the same code as every item in the bill of quantities and had the same code as every item in the construction program. How fantastic that would be to connect scope with time, with cost, and easily be able to see that those are all synchronized. So if you've used BIM correctly, there's enough graphical information contained within the object itself to generate drawings. So nobody has to draft drawings anymore. The object has the graphical information that it needs to look at that thing in plan, section, elevation. There's enough non-graphical data contained within the object to generate notes on drawings or generate schedules. So nobody has to type out schedules anymore. The object produces the information you need if you want to view it in a schedule view. And you can do all sorts of interesting things we spoke about briefly earlier, such as 3D coordination or clash detection. So since every object has a physical presence in a model, software can determine where objects are clashing with each other. You can sequence, so you can connect it to time. You can do quantity extraction, so it's very easy to count all these things because they know what they are. And you can do analysis, and also maybe the one we didn't mention is you can capture within that object relevant information that people will need to operate this component of the building, such as warranty periods, maintenance periods, etc. So that's what the digital twin looks like if you're using BIM. If you're not using BIM, well, you're back to where we started. We have no objects, we have no data. We've got a lot of documents. We've got drawings that people have manually drafted individually, and you've got schedules that people have typed out, but they're all disconnected. And we're back to the problems we had in the beginning of having a set of documentation which is difficult to work with, and it creates waste in terms of time and cost. So let's talk about the challenges and obstacles and maybe some opportunities around BIM and Lean. Probably the biggest challenge is procurement. Yeah. So we have to change the way we buy stuff when we looked at that image earlier of comparing manufacturing to construction, in manufacturing they're buying the thing twice. They're buying the information in a digital model, and then they're buying the physical product. Whereas in construction, we're only buying the physical product, so we're only buying it once. And that's the big challenge, I suppose, is the construction process as we know it is quite fragmented. So between design and construction and even what eventually gets built. And actually, if you're not careful and don't manage this process very carefully, you could end up buying the information 3 or 4 times. So if the design intent information that you buy from designers is not good enough for the construction team to take and develop further construction fabrication information, and they have to start again, which is often the case, then you basically have duplication of work there, which is a lot of waste. And if people don't construct the building on site in accordance with the construction fabrication information, and in other words, if they keep making changes and moving stuff around on site, then in order to get an as-built model, you'd have to send somebody around to do surveying and create the information again, to be able to hand over an as-built model at the end. So the big difference, I suppose, between construction and manufacturing is they do the same thing, but in manufacturing they own the process from end to end. So the designers and the contractors and the operators are all actually working for the same company, and they're all trying to help each other and help the company to make a profit and cut out waste. So there's a much stronger collaboration between those teams, and the information is flowing correctly, and feedback loops between the different parties are helping the process. Whereas in construction, it's quite fragmented, and to be honest, people aren't really trying to help each other. They're just trying to get their own work done. Another important thing to consider is that designers do design and contractors do construction. And by that I mean, I'm an architect and I've been practicing for over 25 years. I understand buildings, but I've never actually built a building. So I really know how to construct a building. And so, expecting designers to produce construction and fabrication information, it's not going to work. So, we need to make sure we've got the right people producing the right information at the right time if you want to deliver the right outcomes. And that would be the lean approach. Unfortunately, in the fragment process we have at the moment, is often the wrong people are producing information at the wrong time, and the outcomes, as we all know, is a high level of waste. So from a procurement point of view, we need to start moving away from sort of traditional design, bid, build, or adversarial contracting, where the specialists who understand how to build stuff are sort of brought in very late in the day and have no way to influence the design. And we have to move towards more partnering or alliancing type of contracting, like integrated project delivery, where the specialist knowledge about construction can be brought into the process, more like the manufacturing model that we see there. There's a closer collaboration between the parties, and that in the end, what gets physically constructed on site is exactly what was constructed in the model, as they do in manufacturing and before. So that's really important, that you build the digital model first. We've seen a lot of projects where they go and construct the physical building on site, and then they send in afterwards to go and survey and construct the digital model. I mean, that's a complete waste again. The next sort of challenge or obstacle I was going to talk about was the business models that we have out there, and we can't be naive about this, that in the current procurement environment, some companies and some people have just learned to play the system or play the game, and so there are business models out there that have learned how to profit on waste, and then there's business models out there that are looking to create value. So there's a big difference between the two. On the first one, actually having the project end up more expensive is good for business, because they've learned to profit from the expense, or they've learned to profit from the project taking longer. The more uncertain it is, the better. The less transparent it is, the better. So the strength of organizations that have this sort of mentality is their ability to carry risk and control others in the supply chain, and they make profit through manipulation of the supply chain and continuous efforts to reduce quality. And the difference is with organizations that are looking to create value, the less expensive the better. So they can deliver a cheaper product for their customers. If they can deliver it quicker, they can remove the risk and the uncertainty and be more transparent, the better. And the strength of this type of organization is their ability to reduce the risk and collaborate with others, closer to the sort of manufacturing model that we looked at earlier. And they profit through partnerships, working with people that they trust and work with on a regular basis, with a consistent effort to continuously reduce waste and improve quality or value. So these two models exist, and we can't pretend that they don't exist. The opportunity, I suppose, and would to say to everybody, let's get out of the waste producing business and let's get into the value creating business. And we've seen in many sectors of the industry where companies have become, or customers have become frustrated, and companies have provided solutions that are better, that are quicker, and are cheaper, not by reducing quality, but by reducing waste. So you've seen that in the travel industry, the music industry, the taxi industry. So this is happening in construction. There are companies out there right now who have taken a view that they're going to get more value for their customers, and those types of companies will eventually disrupt the market. So the choice for everyone listening in every business is you can choose which model you want to be. You can choose whether you're going to be disrupted, or you could choose whether you want to be the disruptor. So hopefully you make the right choice. The next challenge I was going to talk about was people. At the end of the day, buildings are constructed by people and for people. And while lean processes are really good to drive out waste, and technologies like BIM are excellent to help that process, we need to work with capable people who are willing to collaborate on projects, who are willing to follow defined processes and industry standards, and take responsibility for the work they do and the output that they produce. So really, this is about every one of you listening to this webinar and the talk. To be honest, you're either helping the process or you're hindering the process. So you're either contributing data to the process or you're contributing paper. And you need to make that decision for yourself. And find people and work with people who are willing to help, not hinder the process. So in terms of project management and how do you actually achieve what we're talking about, well, the first thing is, don't make it up yourself. There are industry standards out there. ISO 19650 is a standard for information management. It's been accepted at the international level. It's been adopted at a European level. It's an Irish standard because Ireland, as a member state of the EU, has to adopt the standard. So it is the Irish standard for information management. So you can make up your own way of doing things if you like. There's no regulation that says you can't. There's no at the moment, but I promise you, your way of doing things will never become an Irish, European, or international standard because the standard already exists. So the easiest thing for most people to do is just say, this is the standard, this is the way we're going to work, and if we use this standard on every project, it'll be really easy for everybody because you're not learning on every project. The second thing I would say is choose the right people. Don't get into bed on a project with people who are going to hinder the way you want to work. So when you pre-qualify, people ask important questions, which there's 4 questions set out in PAS 91 about people's willingness to follow the standard and their capability to follow the standard. The next point I would make is that we are trying to buy the digital version of this building, so we have to have clear requirements of what that is we're trying to purchase. So there has to be an exchange information requirement document that sets that out. You've got to put commercial agreements in place, so you've got to make BIM part of the contract, and that's done through the BIM protocol. You've got to put somebody in charge, and that's given a scope of service for information management. You've got to deal with some PI insurance, and 7 is really important. Like, you wouldn't attempt to build a physical building without a plan of work. So why would you attempt to build the digital version of the building without a plan of work? So, clearly set out before you even start who's going to do what, when they're going to do it, how much detail they're going to put in, etc. When you go out to procure the design and the construction through the supply chain, what you're asking is for a BIM execution plan for the supply chain to tell you as the employer how they're going to do the work. So the BIM execution plan is a direct response to the EIR, and as part of that, you do a more thorough assessment of the BIM capabilities of the team. When people get appointed, you update the BIM execution plan for both design and construction. You put a common data environment in place that will hold all the graphical data, non-graphical data, and documents for the project in a digital format. So we're not exchanging paper anymore. We're exchanging digital files in a controlled manner. And the end deliverable of this process set out in the standard is a digital version of the physical building, which will include operational data, common classification systems, and also some post-occupancy evaluation around the building. So it's a 12-step process. It's not rocket science, to be honest, but it's really important that these key things happen at the right time. The Royal Institute of Architects have put a BIM pack together, which includes advice notes, templates, guidance, supporting the BIM Level 2 process as it's described there. This is available for free, so as an organization or as a person, you don't have to start with a blank sheet of paper. It's all there for you. And if anybody wants to really use this process to its max on their projects or within their business, that's what we do. We here to support the industry. For 10 years now, we've been supporting projects and companies to embrace this way of working that I've described. By engaging with us on your projects, effectively you bring that sort of experience into the project or into your business to leverage it and reduce waste, become more lean in the way you produce and manage information, and get better outcomes on your projects. So there are my contact details for anybody who wants them. Love to connect with you, and we'll have some discussion and questions.
Thanks, Ralph. I'd like to thank Ralph for his very insightful presentation. We will now move on to the Q&A. We have several questions in already. BIM and Lean seem so obvious when you hear about it. Why is adoption so slow?
Yeah, that's a complicated question, and I think I've addressed a little bit of that within the presentation. But the industry is obviously set up over hundreds of years to function in a certain way, and that way wasn't set up to be the least wasteful way or lean way, or produce information in the way we've derived in accordance with sort of a more manufacturing approach. So really the industry has to come together and repurpose itself, and that's a big task. But the efforts are starting. I mean, the National BIM Council of Ireland have set out a fantastic document that sets out a roadmap for the digitization of the industry, but it's really for industry now to pick up that data and start doing some of the things it says. So we need leadership. We need leaders in companies to embrace this way of thinking and drive their organizations to become better at what they do, and then we need people within the industry to embrace these ways of working and follow standards, and in many get the upskilling you need or the skills you need. So it's complicated, but we can do it.
Absolutely. Another question here. What can LCI members do to help speed up adoption?
Yeah. Well, probably one of the biggest obstacles to adoption is misunderstanding, or people not knowing how this will benefit their business or their career or their so I think the first thing you can do is read, research, learn, find out what this is going to do for you. It's going to make your business more productive. It's going to make your career more exciting if you're working in this way. And but people need to investigate, and I think the LCI are doing a great job in terms of through these webinars and other mechanisms of educating and helping the industry to understand better ways of working. And that's really your tagline. I'm just seeing it at the bottom there. Deliver projects better, faster, and together. And we're all got to be thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a final question, what is the best way to get started in BIM?
The best way, I sort of touched on that, but we don't make it up yourself. Don't go and try and invent a new way. So there are defined industry standards. We've got to start following them. There's like, depending on your role, like it's different for every role. So if you're somebody who produces drawings at the moment, you need to go and learn how to do that through a modeling process. If you're a quantity surveyor and you need to learn how to extract quantities from models and produce cost plans, etc., out of that, or an estimator. If you're a project manager, you need to be able, or project planner, you need to be able to connect your construction program to these models through time. So the learning is different, but upskilling is the big thing. I think people need to understand you can't use skills that you learned 20 years ago to do this to do what we're doing today. So you have to acquire new skills and new understanding. But the outcome is for your career and your business is fantastic. I mean, it'd be life-changing.
Absolutely. Okay, brilliant. So that's all the questions we have today. I'd like to thank Ralph again for his presentation. A copy of this webinar will be sent out to everyone who attended. The next webinar will take place on the 25th of September, the topic of which is Quality Matters, and will be presented by Paul Nash from Paul Nash Consultancy. We will send out the information shortly via LinkedIn, Twitter and newsletter. Thank you again from Ralph and myself on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland. You can follow Lean Construction Ireland on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook and through the website leanconstructionireland.ie. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Susan.
No problem, Ralph. Thank you again.
Okay, bye.